I have to say, if Donald Trump wins, it'll be a minor miracle. But we shall see. To another election that panned out pretty obviously, except, of course, I think, well, I've got to say that Labor did better than expected. It's the one in Queensland last Saturday. Labor Premier Annastacia Palaszczuk, big victory, swing of almost 5% to her on primary votes. Majority government, bigger win than most tipped. LNP leader Deb Frecklington today said, well, she'd resign, despite initially saying she'd stay on.
On Saturday night, I said I wanted to remain leader of the Liberal National Party. My first instinct is always to fight on. Since then, I've had a great day with my family and my husband, Jason, and reflected on my future. Once all of the results are finally declared, I will convene a party room meeting and I will ask my colleagues to appoint a new leader of the Liberal National Party.
I feel very sorry for her, and she seems a very nice person, but I have to say, even there, flip-flopping and something like that, I'm going to lead, I'm not going to lead. Deb Frecklington never really seemed strong or authoritative, a leader, to be honest, and might say the same about Liberal leader Michael O'Brien in Victoria, or even federal Labor leader Anthony Albanese, lesser example, but still, who's today trying to make some of the Queensland success rub off on him.
There were two primary issues, and number one was the issue of borders and keeping Queenslanders safe. There's no question that that's the case, and there's no question that Scott Morrison's intervention by travelling to Queensland, giving up on the National Cabinet, cancelling a National Cabinet meeting because he was too busy campaigning for the LNP and doing fundraisers for the LNP, backfired.
Joining me are Michael Costa, former Victorian Liberal President, and Michael Costa, former New South Wales Labor Treasurer. Michael Costa, what does the Queensland election result prove?
Proves that fear works, Andrew. I think they ran a campaign that had a single theme, and that was, keep those other people out of our state, and we'll all be safe. And it was very effective. Having said that, it was incumbent on the opposition to run a counter narrative, which I think they failed miserably to do. Michael Costa can talk about all the backroom shenanigans that contributed to that result, but clearly fear works. And, the worry here, of course, is that across all of our states now we have chief medical officers that are acting as politicians. There needs to be a review of all of that legislation after this pandemic has subsided. We just can't have one person making these decisions and governments hiding behind them, and that's clearly what's been happening. There needs to be some sort of panel or accountability to deal with chief medical officers and the advice, because it is leading to a situation where a counter narrative is really not able to be sustained.
But Michael Costa, that's not going to happen, because it delivered an election. Why would a leader then want to say, no, I don't want to have this excuse of, only following medical orders? Fear works, plus a whole dollop of extra government spending. Clearly works.
It does. She ran two policies during the election, Andrew. One, you'll recognise this, I will decide who comes into Queensland and the circumstances in which they come. And the second policy, which is a corollary of the first, which is those people from Canberra and the southern states, you stay out of Queensland. Queensland for Queenslanders. Hello. John Howard's policy was the first, and the late great Joe Bjelke-Petersen was the second. It's always worked in Queensland, and it worked again on Saturday.
How interesting, very conservative kind of playbook then. But the thing too is, Michael Costa, on top of that I would add this. Policies, yes, and I thought the LNP policies weren't great. I mean, Bradfield schemes and all that kind of stuff really bore me to sobs, to be honest. I know others on this network are very strong on them. But the thing is, you've first got to have a leader that looks like they know where they're going and determined to go through a wall to get there. You've got to have that. And for all the will in the world, I could not see Deb Frecklington projecting leadership. Even in that final leaders debate, as I said last week, whenever she got heckled and interrupted by the Premier, she just sat, stood back like, oh, please, you go first. It was just no gravitas.
Yeah, Andrew, that's true. But remember that it wasn't long ago that Palaszczuk was in the same position. People didn't see her as a strong leader. Look, I think it's a bit more complex than that. I think her biggest problem was that she didn't have a narrative. I mean, I don't know what they were on about. Handouts, $300 for rego. I mean, crime in certain areas. It wasn't a counter narrative to the overwhelming focus on fear and the medical advice. I mean, if you're gonna run these things, you really do need to put a narrative. I mean, she had a choice.
I think that's right.
She could have said, "I support."
No, look, a narrative though is something that Michael Costa's talked about in the past. You need conviction for a narrative. That's the problem. You need deep convictions, and the Liberals specialise in not producing leaders with them at the moment, I have to say, unfortunately. How likely, now that she's won, right, Palaszczuk's won, she campaigned all the time, I'm going to keep people out, I'm going to keep New South Wales out. A day later, 2 days later, she said, oh, well, look, we'll let rural New South Wales in, but still not those Sydney-siders. How many days do you give it before Sydney-siders are allowed, and Victorians for that matter, are allowed to travel in Queensland?
Well, she'll do it in a way which doesn't make her look as if she was, fibbing up until the election. But luckily for her...
Is that 1 week? Is it 2 weeks?
Luckily
Christmas.
for her,
Andrew, Christmas.
Her win...
Christmas, okay. Yeah, it has to be.
Her win is coinciding with the collapse of virus infections in Victoria and in New South Wales, and she can then say, here's the medical evidence. Here's the medical evidence, and I'm going to make a change because the medical evidence shows that we can do it. And is anyone going to oppose that? No, everyone's now going to be happy. The election's over. Basically, people want the virus behind us. They're backing their leaders in times of crisis, which is why the American president shouldn't be in any trouble, but he is. People are reverting to supporting the government in times of crisis because they themselves can't stop the virus. Only a government has. They will the governments to succeed as they did on Saturday. All
right, I got a bet with a certain boss who said 2 weeks after the election it'll be changed. You guys both, well, I heard you, Michael Costa, say Christmas. I think that's absolutely sure. Michael Costa, One Nation's Pauline Hanson's party lost half its vote from the last election, down 7%, 7 percentage points. I should point out that the Greens got only 9%, only a little bit better, and that's when it gets lots of media support, when One Nation always gets a lot of media abuse. But what do you make of that result for One Nation?
I think it's a terrible result, Andrew. I don't think you can gild the lily on this thing. I mean, the reality is that they did go backwards. You heard Pauline in the lead-up. She had great expectations. I know she does every time. But even on Friday, she was talking up all these seats they were going to win. The interesting thing for me, of course, is that, and I've said this on many occasions in the past, that, One Nation draws on Labor voters in large numbers, and you actually saw that. You saw those Labor voters returning back to Labor, which is, quite surprising. But, I think they've got real problems in Queensland. As for the Greens, at least they picked up a seat. Their votes might have gone down, but they kept their sort of upper middle class lefty base, and they picked up a seat, with the help of the LNP. But,
well, that was so stupid, preferencing the Greens above Labor, and now look. But picking up something there, Michael Costa. So Pauline Hanson's right. So she's lost 7 percentage points. Labor's vote went up nearly 5%. The Libs went up 2%. So that says, like Michael Costa said, most of those One Nation votes seem to have gone to Labor, and in fact the preferences too. 1/3 of the One Nation preferences went to Labor. What is that telling you?
Well, the result is very easy to understand. One Nation has certain policy brand equities, none of which were at play in this election. It was an election about Islamic terrorism, illegal immigration, borders being down, Islamic terrorism, they're the cultural issues that One Nation campaigns on. None of those were at issue in this election. Of course its vote's going to go down. Of course its vote's going to go down.
She's got a small playbook.
She's got a small playbook, and that's our own credibility. No one's interested in Pauline's views on the economy or anything else. So none of those issues were really at play in this election. Of course the vote's going to go down. That's why the Greens vote went down. There are no Green issues really in this election. They've got their core vote of 9% of nutters who were always going to vote for them. But this wasn't a Green election. This was an election about the virus and keeping the people out, and her protecting Queenslanders' from,
I
Southern.
should point out that Pauline Hanson, of course, is in the Senate, wasn't standing in a state election, and I should imagine she'll win if she stands in the next election for the Senate. But anyway, I think that was a bit of a blow. Just very quickly, we're out of time, but Michael Costa, Trump versus Biden, who do you want to win? Who do you think will win in a nutshell?
Well, I think the polls are wrong. My feeling is, the bloke just drew 57,000 people to a rally in Pennsylvania. If those people actually haven't voted and turn up on election day, I think he's got a good chance. Having said that, the polls are showing he's going to lose. There's only one or two, I suppose, right-wing polls that show he can win, but I think he can win. This is up for grabs, and he's done everything right at this stage in terms of the campaign.
I doubt he's going to win, but I'd be voting for Trump because I don't want Kamala Harris. And there's no way in the world that Biden, if he gets elected, is going to be president for 4 years.
That's true.
He's not going to last 4 years. So Harris becomes president of the United States, the most left-wing senator in the Senate, and then all hell breaks loose.
Someone who, at the end of her tilt for the Democrat presidential nominee, was getting about 0% of Democrat votes.
One.
Oh, one, was it? 1%. I'm so sorry. Oh, correct me, slap me.
Very popular.
Absolutely.